And here we come to the most exciting part of the summit, which is this exclusive fireside chat. And I'm very happy to welcome and introduce an eminent set of panelists and speakers. Mr. Ajay Banga, Executive Chairman, MasterCard. Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri, Honorable Minister for Housing and Urban Affairs and Ministry of Civil Aviation and Minister of State for Commerce and Industry, Government of India. Welcome, sir. The session will be anchored by Ms. Shireen Bhan, Managing Editor, CNBC TV18. It had to take a global pandemic to finally get Mr. Ajay Banga's availability for us to speak in the Inclusive Finance India Summit after our several earnest efforts of the last 5 years. So we are both thrilled and privileged to have him join us today. And when we broached the idea with the Honorable Minister, Mr. Puri, it was refreshing to get his unfussed, prompt response to join this fireside chat with Mr. Banga. I think our CEO got him in a good mood with the Central Vista redevelopment plan having just been approved by the Supreme Court. And continuing to ride on our luck, Shireen too was available and agreed to anchor this highlight session today. There could have been anyone better for us to get to probe and provoke these two leaders and engage them in a frank and friendly and maybe fierce conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to this exclusive fireside chat today on economic inclusion of the urban base of the pyramid, global and local experiences. I will let Shireen set the context and take this forward now. Welcome again, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Radhika, and thank you to our viewers for joining us on this very special conversation at the Inclusive Finance India Summit. Many thanks to the Minister for Civil Aviation and Urban Development, Mr. Hardeep Puri, as well as the Executive Chairman of MasterCard, Ajay Banga, for joining us on this conversation. It's interesting that we've got the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report being released today on a day when we intend to talk about the inequities that the COVID pandemic has thrust upon us, not just here in India, but globally as well. And we talk about the road ahead as far as public and private partnerships are concerned, what the collaborations could look like, how do we bridge the inequities. Let me very quickly highlight what the report says. The COVID-19 pandemic has increased disparities and social fragmentation, and in the next 3 to 5 years, it will threaten the economy, and the next 5 to 10 years will weaken geopolitical stability. Of course, environmental concerns continue to be in the top of the global risk, but that is more long-term. In the near term, lives and livelihood, that is one of the biggest concerns that we are faced with. Without further ado, let me get the two gentlemen on my panel to kickstart the conversation. Mr. Puri, this has been an issue that we have had to contend with over the last 9 months as we've gone through the COVID-19 pandemic. Many measures have already been taken by the government of India to try and ensure that there is job security. We haven't been able to perhaps do much in terms of providing salary support, but the government has tried to provide relief measures in different ways. As we look ahead, what to your mind have been the key lessons, the key learnings, and how do you believe these lessons could help in redesigning or tinkering, reviewing some of the schemes that are already part of the government's ammunition, and what you intend to do going forward?
Thank you very much, Shireen. Let me start by thanking you for including me in this chat with my very distinguished and eminent friend of long-standing, Mr. Banga. I think I was very happy with all that was said, but the only comment I was a little uneasy on was that it takes a pandemic to get Ajay onto a show like this. So I hope we don't have to wait for a repetition of this kind of an occurrence. So this is in lighter vein. First of all, I haven't read the World Economic Forum report, but I have no doubt that you've given us a very succinct summary of it. Let me say two things about India, which makes it a sui generis case. Every country has had to deal with this disruption, the pandemic. But what is not perhaps fully known outside India is that we have one country which had to feed 800 million people for 9 months. Now, 800 million people for 9 months is a huge, the scale is huge. And some of the other things that we've done also, I don't think we have the time for me to catalog them. But the second point I want to make is that we've learned some very valuable lessons. We had several flagship programs in place. India is going to have something like 600 million people living in urban spaces by the time we finish the 2030 agenda, or the sustainable development goals are completed by the UN. These 600 million people were already, we had the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, the Swachh Bharat Mission, Amrut, Jal Shakti Mission, all that there. But we learned that no matter with the best of planning, the anticipation, some things you learn when you are in the midst of a pandemic like this, which, I was ambassador to Geneva and to the UN in Geneva and New York. I dealt with H1N1, I dealt with SARS, I dealt with Ebola. We've never had anything like this. This was like the Spanish flu of 1918. Now, one of the things we learned is that some of the most vulnerable sections of society need special attention. Therefore, this explains, when it is very easy to effect a lockdown. Easy means it requires an administrative decision, and then you must have the administrative wherewithal to tell people to stay where they are. It's much more difficult to reopen the economy in a calibrated way. So the choice between life and livelihood, and I think we got the lockdown in time. It was effective, it was comprehensive. That gave us the time to build the health care infrastructure, do other things. But we've opened up the economy, which is a much more fundamental requirement. Otherwise, the closure of the economy will produce the adverse effects which the pandemic perhaps failed to do. Now, two things we learned during this. One is the migrant workers. Not everybody wants a house which they can call their own. Yes, we had a target of 1 crore 12 lakhs. We've succeeded there. 1 crore 9 lakh homes have been sanctioned. 70 lakhs are under construction. 40 lakhs already given to the beneficiary. But when people come looking for work from the rural areas to the urban tier 1, tier 2 or megapolises, they need place to live in. So the affordable rental housing scheme is one of the big takeaways, lessons we've learned. We've been able to effect it very quickly. MOUs are being concluded between the state governments and all the other parties concerned. The second one, another very vulnerable section in any urban area, more so in countries like India, is what we call the street vendors. These are people who go to, money lenders, borrow money at fantastically exorbitant rates, and they barely manage. We've got this scheme which Ajay would be familiar with, which is a scheme of microfinance, of financial and social inclusion. We targeted 50 lakh people for coverage under the scheme. I'm delighted to inform you that the scheme started in June, and by July, we have registered the bulk of them. I think the figures are something like 34 lakh people have been registered, something like 20 lakh people have been disbursed loans, and we are moving at a fantastic pace. I know that many friends of mine in the private sector are out to help us. We get the data from these people. We are able to utilize that data to make them, little entrepreneurs. The initial borrowing may be 10,000. When they return it, they can go up. So they go up on the entrepreneur scale. The public sector banks have been very good. I have some excellent examples of private sector banks also, but we need a little bit of a push there. Going forward, we need to develop these schemes, these kinds of schemes. When the World Economic Forum says that going forward, these what they call disparities and social fragmentation, to use your words, will be things we need to address constantly, and climate change. I broadly agree with that, but it also depends to a large extent on the behavior of the virus. If we are right in our assessment that enough vaccines are going to be available, I'm personally an optimist. I'm also a member of the group of ministers on health. I think come 15th February, there'll be more vaccine around than people think, and the two Indian entities, Serum Institute, which is making the AstraZeneca vaccine, is able to ramp up production. They're already giving figures like 50 million. Our target today is to vaccinate 300 million people between now, 16 January when it started, and June, July, which means we need 600 million doses. We are absolutely confident of getting those. We are actually also now supplying to Bangladesh. I saw a plane is coming. We're doing other things. So fingers crossed, we got it okay so far. But going forward, these are the things we'll have to watch out for. And I'm confident that with inspiration from my friend Ajay and others and a little private sector, look, I'm very clear. These are not projects undertaken by the governments anywhere in the world. I'm not talking about India. You need all people, and it has to be done. The altruism and philanthropy is one part of it. Government is committed to making the vaccine available free of cost to a certain number of people. But at the end of the day, there has to be an economic system and a model. And I think the world is on the right track on this one. I don't know how it's going to take shape later, because there are out there many learned people, including where Ajay is, who keep prophesizing that, wait till the next one, etc. But I think we are getting into a new norm on working, new norm on how we will conduct our lives. And when that takes shape, I'm absolutely clear the more vulnerable sections of our society will need special care.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Puri, for very comprehensively articulating some of the priorities that the government intends to focus on and taking us through the schemes that have been already put in place, like the PM Swanidhi scheme, which was part of the Atmanirbhar package that you just told us about. But Ajay Banga, let me come back to you now and address the issue of public-private participation and public-private cooperation. As Mr. Puri said, that this is going to require all stakeholders to come together, not just in dealing with the pandemic, but in dealing with the aftermath of the pandemic, in trying to bridge the many inequities, whether digital or economic. Now, you're going to be leading a conversation as part of the Davos agenda on exactly that, on digital inclusion. What do you believe will need to be the priorities as we look ahead in your experience of what we've gone through over the last 9 months?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me, Shireen, and thank you for doing this. And, for folks from Access, if you ever need me to participate in a panel, one of the easiest ways is to collect Hardeep and Shireen together, and you'll find me very rarely resisting. They're both friends, and I have a lot of time for their intellect and their capability, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to be with both of you. My view, Shireen, is that the world's problems fit on three sides of a triangle. One side of the triangle is the one versus many. That's the inclusion, exclusion, social inequities, economic inequities, religious inequities, all that. Another side of the panel, of the triangle, is the man versus nature. And I say man deliberately because most men cause more damage to nature than women do. It's just proven fact. And so those two are held up by a trade-off between long-termism and short-termism. What Hardeep just defined was the effort by the Indian government over the last few years, not just the pandemic, to find the right balance on that long-term, short-term space. They've tried to invest out in an effort to be able to solve for the other two sides of the triangle. Nobody gets everything right, but I think they've done a lot of things that are very interesting. One of the problems that the world is seeing with the pandemic is not just the impact on disadvantaged people who already were disadvantaged. In the case of the United States, it's women, it's minorities, because the kind of jobs they were in were the kind of jobs that got impacted the most by the pandemic. And therefore, the economic impact on them, including small businesses which they ran, was the most severe. That is true for most countries around the world. But I think the underlying issue, the part you were getting at, is digital divide. And that's a problem that worries me enormously. And I've said this some years back, that you cannot have the internet of everything without the inclusion of everyone. Because otherwise the digital space will actually create a further digital divide. And what do I mean by that? I mean access to basic infrastructure, which includes the availability of the broadband width and capabilities across all parts of countries. Forget about India's challenges. Those are really quite incredible, and much effort has been made. Even in the United States, during the pandemic, the access to rural infrastructure for broadband, the access to disadvantaged communities in urban areas, these were real challenges. The second part of it is, of course, the most simpler one, which is the device and the cost of the device, and those are solvable through various ways. But the third part, and this is I really believe in, is the aspect of engaging the public, the citizenry, in engaging with government through digital systems. The more you do that, the more they engage and the more they get included and the more they get educated about the value of digital. This can be all the way from individuals to small businesses. So my view is that the government by itself cannot achieve all this. Hardeep was just saying government can do some things, but you need an economic model. There is a very deep truth in that. And that is that there is not enough money or resources, either at governments or with philanthropies, to be able to solve those three sides of the triangle. You need the private sector's capital and ingenuity and technology and people to come to the party. And therefore finding the right economic model by which government sets the rules, they set the guidelines, they set the rails, they sometimes take the first risk of investment when it's too hard for a private sector to understand what to do. But then they allow things to flourish and they allow an economic model to establish itself. And threading that needle is hard, but that's kind of what I think you will see us talk about when we talk about digital inclusion. I'll give you one fact of information for you. MasterCard made a commitment in 2014 to reach 500 million people for financial inclusion by the year 2020. We have done that in 120 countries around the world. And then we said we'll now reach 1 billion, including 50 million micro SMEs and 25 million women entrepreneurs. And that's our new effort in the next 5 years. In connection with that, in India, we launched a 250 crore effort for small businesses. We're working with the USAID and the government of the US in parts of India to help women entrepreneurs. We're working with Mandeshi. We're working with Access to enable this outreach and to enable a way to create the infrastructure and the rails for this inclusion to happen. All we need is an open door and the ability to participate. And that's what we're trying to do in every country, including in India.
Well, that's a great point that I intend to take up with Mr. Puri. I love the line that you said that the Internet of everything must have or must include everyone as well. But Hardeep Puri, to the point that was being made there by Ajay Banga, that the government needs to play a much more facilitating role, also perhaps needs to provide brisk capital where necessary. Now let's talk about the two ministries that you're spearheading, sir, urban development and civil aviation. And in many ways, these are economic multipliers as well as massive job creators. You spoke about the government's emphasis on wanting to address the most vulnerable, as well as prioritize job creation. As you look ahead, how do you intend to do that? And what is your ask from the private sector as you try and ensure that you achieve those targets?
Thank you, Shireen. Before I respond to the specific questions that you have raised, let me also, just to complete the picture in terms of my understanding, we today have in India something like 700 million connection, which is the largest broadband users in the world. We have 696 million Indians using smartphones, and the largest data usage per smartphone at an average of 9.8 gigabytes per month as per Ericsson, a Swedish manufacturer. Our Jan Dhan Yojana, Aadhaar and our mobile phones, our UPI has crossed US $57 billion or 4 trillion rupees. So I can give you those statistics. That's what the government has been doing. And I think if you look at the scale, the figures speak for themselves. But which does not result in my deviating any bit from what I said in my first submission to you, in which Ajay has focused in on. And I totally agree, there has to be a public-private partnership in this. Let me start with civil aviation. Out of my two ministries for which I have line responsibility. Look, in civil aviation, we have a 7% penetration, which means out of 100 Indians, 7 fly. We have, prior to the pandemic, we had always double-digit growth rates. At one stage, 17%. When a very well-known brand, a particular air carrier ceased operation, between April of 2018 and December of 2018 and April of 2019, we had 560 aircraft in the sky. Today we are at 750. Look, today our air travel, today we have a price band operational because of the COVID, which makes it a sui generis sort of a situation. Today the rail fare, second class AC between Delhi and Mumbai is 3,000 rupees, and the air ticket price band on the lower part is 3,500 rupees. Today Bihar is giving you 21% rate of growth in civil aviation. We seized civil aviation, we clamped down on 23rd March, we opened on 25th May. I always described as a pre-COVID figure as 300,000 or 350,000 passengers per day. Maybe I was wrong, my secretary keeps reminding me, sometimes it's more. But we are almost at pre-COVID levels. Yesterday's figure I think was 290,000 or thereabouts. Now you're 290,000. I used to say we will get pre-COVID, which is 300 or 350,000 by 31st December. Maybe if this talk about a UK strain had not come in, or maybe if the vaccine had produced a more positive narrative a little earlier, I would have got it. But I'm confident by the end of January, we will be at pre-COVID level. What can we do on air travel, civil aviation? Shireen, we are building 100 new airports. 100 new airports. And I'm mentioning this because I want my friend Ajay to hear this. When we privatized the first two airports, which was Delhi and Mumbai, everybody said, ye pata nahi chalega, nahi chalega. I can tell you from my personal example, when Lakshmi and I were young foreign service trainees or probationers, and we went to Tokyo in the year of the Lord 1975, I think. On 1975 or 1976, Delhi Indira Gandhi International Airport used to be called Palam. It had 1 million air traffic per year. Today, Delhi is 70 million plus. The traffic cannot increase because we need a fourth runway. When that comes and when Jewar comes, Jewar is the airport nearby in UP, we will have more air traffic in Delhi and Jewar put together, more than London, Heathrow, Stansted and Gatwick. More than 140 million. I can tell you with confidence. How are we able to do this? How are we doing the other 100 airports? Because these two airports in Delhi and Mumbai gave us till 2020, they gave us 29,000 crores with the Airports Authority. Now you can quarrel with the model ki ye theek nahi tha. What if it's a learning experience? So for many years we had this stipulation, you need to have prior experience. So other than those two entities which won Delhi and Mumbai, nobody could enter the field. So 10-15 years later. Then in 2018, we had another round of 6 privatization of airports, much before I became a minister. I mean, I became minister 6 months later. Today, all 6 airports which were privatized have now been handed over to the concessionaire, and we are now getting ready for 6 plus more. So 100 airports overall, 6 already privatized, other than the 2 in 2006 and others in between. We are going for another 6. How is this happening? This is all PPP, private sector, etc. And let's be very clear. Sometimes we say, well, only 2 guys got the whole thing. Hey, wait a minute. You know who won the Jewar airport? I looked at the bids. Fantastically competitive, and Zurich airport won it. There, our 2 operators, Delhi, Mumbai, were there. The entity which won the 6 was a little higher, but very competitive. This is what I think private-public partnership in civil aviation is all about. And because we are going down that route, we have the resources. I know what Ajay said, I better be careful. But music to my ears. You need the capital which the private sector can bring in. And you know, governments have to be there. Governments are providing this. Governments are also doing, with that money which the Airports Authority gets, we are going into developing air connectivity in areas where the private sector will not come in. I'm very clear. If you are to, today I had a meeting with the state minister from a particular state, and they can only fly 19-seater aircraft. I told him, forget this, let's extend your runway, let's at least get an ATR 72-seater there, then the private sector, the airlines will come. Many of our airline operators are friends of Ajay, he knows it. The airlines also have to survive. In the pandemic, We had the Airports Authority under stress. We had the air carriers under stress. But what the government can do is to provide a benign environment in which we try, I could give you a long list of what we did. We told some people, look, don't cash in on the loans now, extend the period. You do that kind of management. But the end of the day, make no mistake, the private sector is a crucial player in this. Coming now quickly for a minute only, because I think I'm taking too much time, on housing and urban affairs, equally. All these projects, whether they're smart city project, smart cities had, I think, 200,000 crores, out of which 45,000 is the PPP. Nothing is going to move without that. Even on affordable rental housing, why will it succeed? It will succeed because the manufacturers, those who have factories, those who have manufacturing facilities, they need to make sure that the people, the migrant workers who come and live there, are provided clean, hygienic living space. So God forbid tomorrow something like this takes place again. You don't have those people, cramped in chawls, or, the kind of situation you had in London when the Industrial Revolution had started. So all this is learning. And again, private sector is a very important role to play in all the flagship programs of the Housing and Urban Affairs Ministry.
Good points that you made there, Mr. Puri. But Ajay Banga, let me come to you now, since we're also talking about reshaping of the global supply chain and how India can make use of that opportunity and leverage on this. In light of the fact that we seem to have missed the bus previously when it comes to low-skilled manufacturing, that has become an opportunity that others have capitalized on. We're much bigger on the services side. What are the lessons that you would like to put on the table, and perhaps policy recommendations, since Mr. Puri is in a listening mode today? What is it that you'd like to put on the table so that we can truly become the manufacturing magnet?
Well, I think the idea of making in India is not just limited to manufacturing. It is very much a part of the services game as well. And I think that that's always been my approach, way back to when I remember going to a Vibrant Gujarat function early in the first term of this government. And I said that don't make in India only about manufacturing. Make it about where the puck is going. You've got to skate to where the puck is going. And low-cost manufacturing is really not something that India will easily compete in. It needs so many investments in terms of infrastructure, taxes, the structure of customs facilitation, and it requires a lot of work, which to do and compete after that and remain vibrantly competitive is not that easy. It's a task the government is willing to fight for, which I commend them for, but it's not that easy. I think services is an enormous opportunity for India. You look at a company like ours, we invested $1 billion, Shireen, into India in the first term of this government, and we're putting another $1 billion into this in the second term. And what we're doing there today is that 16% of our global manpower is in India. When I joined MasterCard 11 years ago, it was 1.2%. And that 16% is not back office call center operators or data center operators. These are highly trained engineers and AI scientists who are looking at developing products in India for the world, ranging from cybersecurity tools to mobile payment tools. We've launched a number of those in India for the Indian benefit, but we also use them to come overseas. To do that well requires a certain facilitation. It requires a welcoming, obviously, level playing field kind of environment. My general view about India on that front is that if you are transparent and you look at state governments, not just central government, to start putting yourself into business, you can find your way through that. The second part is a level playing field locally to compete. There, I think India has the most spotty record. It does well in some cases, and in others, like many other emerging markets, which are now trying to become bigger, they try and protect domestic industry and domestic players for good reason. You want domestic champions. The question, and it's an art form, not a science, is how do you also enable the best of the world to come to you so you in turn can take the best of India to the world. That's not easy to do. It's threading the needle. And I think like every other country, you learn as you go along. My general view on all of these is that I'm a bull on India's long-term case. I'm a believer on investing there in this kind of space because I believe that India's role in the manufacturing of services globally will actually be quite interesting. What does India need to do a little bit more of? I think on education, you know that the Prime Minister and his government are attempting to put a lot of effort into it. That has to continue, because without that, you don't get the manpower for driving the kind of services that I'm talking about. And the second is to enable this aspect of level playing fields. Get the best in, and then use that to become even better so you in turn can compete. And that's kind of the space. I have a point of view on some of these things to do with data, for example, and data privacy, a topic that is of hot debate in India periodically. It's of hot debate in the US. We have 18 states in the United States trying to pass data privacy laws. If you do that, you will end up with a patchwork quilt of nonsense in our country here. So, no country has got this right. Data is a real topic for the future. But what we did was, with a bunch of companies, we put out a data responsibility principle, which applies whether you're a domestic company or a multinational. And listen to these principles. They're very simple. First, you as a consumer, the data is yours, and you should benefit from it. Rule 1. Rule 2, you need to know what is being collected about you without signing an 18-page legal agreement that you don't know how to scroll through. So you just click agree. That's what happens today. That's not okay. 3, you should have the right to be forgotten and have data to be deleted without going through hoops to do it. 4, I, as a company doing business with you, I should collect the minimum amount of data that I need to do my job with you. For example, in payments, I don't know your name when you spend money. I only know a 16-digit account number, whether on a card or a phone or a fingerprint or whatever. And I know that you spent X number of rupees at this kind of merchant. I don't know what you bought, and I don't know your name. I don't need to. I shouldn't know it. Your bank should, your merchant should, but I don't need to. So collecting the minimum you need, and then finally, whatever you collect, it's your duty to keep it safe. These are not crazy principles, but they apply equally to domestic players and overseas players in every country we work. This is not about data being used by foreigners or locals. This is about doing the right thing for people in the country. And so my general view is that I'm a bull on where India is going. I think India can be a real winner, not just in the manufacturing sector, but in the making of services. I think India has a lot of skills in that space. We are beneficiaries as a company of India's skills in that space. My single largest AI center in the world is now in India, as an example. So that's where I'm going.
Well, yes, I know that you've been a long-term and a long-standing bull on India, Ajay Banga, and it's good to hear that continues. But Mr. Puri, on that last point, and I think I love the matrix that you've held out as far as data is concerned and the use of data by companies and corporations. It's a practical, pragmatic approach that you've put in place. We're still, of course, awaiting the legal framework here in India. But Mr. Puri, on the issue of skills and education, and since we're talking about a post-COVID world where digitization has already accelerated and will accelerate even further, is this going to be a key priority for the government to ensure that we've got a young population? This is a young democracy, that people are going to be skilled with the needs of the future. Ajay Banga talked about his largest AI center here in India. Will the government ensure that capital bandwidth is spent on ensuring that we have the skills for the future?
Shireen, I endorse everything that Mr. Banga has said. I just want to give you something from what I think is my perspective. First of all, he said, or rather he called for a premium on education. I totally agree. If you are in the old world going to buy property, what do you ask? Location, location, location. If you are on the path to development and you find yourself in a situation like India is, and I must say, not only India, this would apply to everywhere. I have a simple answer: education, education, education. I mean, all the advantages, the demographic dividend of a young population, all the advantages you have on other front, I mean, that is severely undermined unless you get your education and your skills equation right. So on that, there is absolutely no doubt. Now, what happens in a case like ours, where you look, $2.89 trillion economy pre-COVID, fine. On the way to a $5 trillion economy, we'll get there, I have no doubt. But look, we have very low per capita incomes. So the developmental challenge in terms of reaching out to people. So I think the new educational policy and the Prime Minister's emphasis, I can share with you. I was one of those, this is pre-COVID, when the Prime Minister took 3 hours off his busy schedule. We got global leaders, some of the leading names on artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, machine learning, etc., in Vigyan Bhavan, and anyone who had anything to do with policy and decisions making was there listening captive. This was about 2 years ago. So I think if you look at what is happening on artificial intelligence in India, the very fact that I think Mr. Banga has his largest AI center in India is one, a reflection on Mr. Banga's faith or being bullish on India. Also, I think some analysis he's done that this is the place where you have the skilled manpower and we develop that in order for India to make its contribution. All right. I want to say another thing. What he said about, first of all, let me just say what we are doing. We've got a new scheme called the Production Linked Incentive Scheme, where we are putting in over 2 lakh crores across 13 sectors, which is aimed at producing, promoting, manufacturing hubs across the country. Just to simplify a complex equation, earlier we were into the world of subsidies, but they were generally disbursed. They were, diffused because a lot of people were claiming those. It started off buying a restitution of indirect taxes like CCS when I was a young first secretary. Over the years, the subsidy schemes grew. We have redesigned those now. And precisely the kind of things that Mr. Banga is saying, that certain sectors need a governmental framework, a governmental handholding. And I think when you look at these 10 priority sectors, which have been earmarked for PLI, that will encourage global entities like MasterCard to look at India more closely. This is one. He makes 4 points on data. I agree with all 4. What we need to do is to see where we need to tweak, because you're going through a phase of mutual suspicion, recrimination. People are looking at what data is wealth. I mean, I don't want to use, and data can be misused. But I am now not looking at there was a reference to supply chain. Clearly, if you face the kind of situation you are on account of the pandemic, you would want to be very careful that you are not overly dependent on one particular source. You would want to diversify as a insurance policy. Equally, when it comes to data, whilst you want to firewall the national security aspect, and believe me, this is not India. I've had the privilege. In fact, New York is my favorite city. I can tell you without doubt, and I have some great places that Ajay and I can introduce you to in New York. But fact of the matter is that concern on data and national security is shared there. I mean, these shares come
everywhere.
Put that aside. Everywhere. So put that aside. Let us say data belongs to you as a fundamental principle. I totally agree. What is being collected is specific to the task at hand. You understand? And that you're not being asked to fill up 18 pages. I mean, if I go and apply for a driving license, surely they only want to know whether my eyesight is okay and I've got my wits about me to drive a car. Why would they want to know where my grandfather's property was or whether I have things? I mean, that's the kind of thing. Number 3, the right to be forgotten. Yes, it is specific to a context. You give information because that information is germane to what you are applying for. And then you are collecting minimum information. For instance, you're collecting that if you're a money transfer agency or you're doing that, you're doing it for that purpose. But we all now need to step forward and as equal stakeholders in that. So I think once you acknowledge that, problems can be resolved. And finally, all I want to say is that, look, chats like this, I don't know whoever devised it, etc. Frankly, without a structured agenda, and from my point of view, it's very productive. It's good use of time. So I would say that we need to be able to, thrash out, remove the cobwebs, so that we are all. I think today what the world has taught us is that many of us will glide out of this or recover and not only our pre-COVID position but build in the future through interaction with gentlemen like the one you got. What are you called now, Ajay? Executive. chief, what, no?
Chairman.
Executive chairman.
Chairman.
So you become even higher than chairman now.
That's what you call a superannuated, soon to be retired guy.
Well.
So, but if I could just add one thing there, I think the idea of everybody putting their shoulder to the wheel is kind of what is behind Hardeep's entire talk today. If you think about it, government, private sector, and I believe in that. I'll give you some tangible examples of how companies can contribute to the role that government can play of creating the guide rails, the risk capital, the level playing field. But then you also have to step forward as a company. So to give an example, I believe that unless women get a better opportunity at improving their business acumen, it's not just giving them credit. They need to understand how to make that business work. If you don't do that for them, and if you don't encourage the men in their family to encourage them to run businesses, you will never make the real progress you want to make with disadvantaged women. Educated women is one thing. Disadvantaged women is a different issue. So to do that, you've got to create and launch methods like I was talking about with USAID or with Mandeshi, where we're opening rural chambers of commerce for women. The idea is to get them to get better business acumen. Or with, for small businesses, we've got this thing going with CII and the National Institute of MSMEs called Digital Shaksham, which is basically the idea of getting people educated on how to run businesses digitally, set up web portals, understand how to run them, understand how to manage their inventory, understand digital payments, do all that in a way that's safe and secure and simple. Because that's really important. Simple is really important. These guys don't have staff to do things for them. They're everything for their business. And so there are things all of us can do. We're trying to do something on getting little kirana shops to get access to credit by digitizing their supply chain, because the distributors of these companies know how much produce they're giving them. So can banks use that to use AI to underwrite that loan and attempt to give them, as Hardeep was saying at the beginning, smaller loans to those 34 lakh people who signed up as street vendors? Think of that as kirana stores all over the country. Or, for example, I'm trying to tie up with an organization I'm involved with here, the American India Foundation, to get MasterCard and the AIF to work together on getting STEM education to young girls. We do that here in many countries in the world. We promised to reach 1 million girls. We've done that. I've now raised that to 5 million. I want at least some good percentage of that to come from India, where young girls from the age of 7, 8, 9, 10 onwards are taught that technology is their friend. It's not something that boys do. These are very simple things, but they are things that private sector companies can apply their might to. Or, for example, in Hardeep's own area of urban transit, we're trying to do things around the world where we educate them that don't use your own closed loop system for payments. It's expensive. In London, they used to do that. It was called the Oyster card. Now they've opened it up to just open loop acceptance. Acceptance of payments is a key enabler, by the way, of digitizing a society. It's not enough to put money in the account. That's a very good start with all the work done with Jan Dhan Yojana. It's equally important, as they're trying to do in India, to get acceptance to expand. The government, along with the banks, has set up a payment infrastructure fund in an effort to get acceptance into many more outlets. Without that, people are still in a cash economy. And so there are learnings that we have around the world, but those learnings through a stakeholder dialogue, through open, structured, transparent dialogue, is the best way to move forward.
So in exactly a minute, Ajay Banga, and I'm going to pick up your words, what is this superannuated, soon-to-be-retired gentleman going to be doing with his time post-March?
Oh, well, I'm going to be around in here as executive chairman for a while. So I also have now some time to be able to do other things. And I'm very focused on the three sides of that triangle. I want to find ways to commercially impact inequality, climate, and care about the long term versus the short term. And I don't know the answers yet. Over the course of this year, I'm going to figure it out. But I am very determined to make a difference to it.
Well, I'm sure that you will. Hardeep Puri, I'm going to give you the final say, sir. I can see that you want to jump right in. Go ahead.
No. First of all, I just want to say that what Ajay has been saying towards the end is exactly, it captures the essence of something that we call the National Urban Livelihoods Mission. And if you look at the statistics, I mean, they're fantastic. In the recent period, 21 5.05 lakh livelihoods created, 10 lakh candidates have been skill trained, 5.19 lakh self-help groups, 52.74 lakh urban poor women brought into self-help groups. I mean, this is the kind of thing on which when one of your people, they come to see me occasionally, Ajay, I'd like to speak to them. So a little more, I think we can do the cross-referencing on the NULM. What we are doing with other self-help groups, etc. That's precisely. Look, don't talk about educated women, because both Ritu and Lakshmi will testify that Ajay and I are feminists, strong supporters of the women's cause. But the real challenge here is the reaching out to those who need to be trained in terms of basic skills and brought them into self-help groups. And what the government can do, and that's where the private sector comes in. That is a ladder. The only comment, I raise my finger not because of the statistic, I raise it. Don't you ever believe what he's telling you about a superannuated, I mean, you know, when you reach the pinnacle and then you're executive chairman, then you are, you know, you're going to add something, etc. This gentleman's going to be around for a while. So that triangle, that, you know, commercially linking inequality with climate, you know, I look forward to that and many more discussions. So don't buy the thing that he's not going to be doing anything.
No, I am absolutely certain that he's got more lined up and there's plenty more on his plate. But gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. We hope to have the two of you back again to indulge in some more plain speak and really have a meaningful dialogue and a conversation on a whole bunch of issues. This was a wonderfully candid conversation, and thank you both for your inputs and sharing them here with us as part of the Inclusive Finance India Summit. We appreciate your time and we wish you both the very best of luck. For now, from all of us here, many thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and we look forward to much more.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. I see Mr. Puri is probably logged out, but thank you so much, Shireen, for agreeing to our request. This was like a really broad-ranging scope that you captured in 45 minutes. And obviously, you are an expert at that, but all issues around inclusion and development.
I did too much. The two panelists were exceptional.
Yes, of course. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Honorable Minister for joining us today. And I heard him say that he acknowledged that this unstructured, free-flowing chat is a good idea. So maybe we will take that, cue and to get this group together again at some point. Thank you so much, Ajay, for joining us today. And thank you so much.
Thank you for your partnership as well. And Shireen, thank you again. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Look forward to seeing you soon.
Bye, guys. Bye, Shireen.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
It has been an
Thank you.
absolute privilege. Thank you.